Greetings, it is I, Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the Pathfinder role-playing game system. I've been talking about magic and spellcasting and all things like that, and last week I was talking about arcane spells, and I talked about arcane spells with wizards. This week, we're going to dive into arcane spells with sorcerers and bards. Now, unlike a wizard, they do not need a spellbook, and they don't have to prepare their spells. Now, like them, they have a limited number of slots that they can choose from, so it's similar to a wizard. They're limited by their spell to the number of slots, and they will get bonus ones equivalent to their charisma. Again, similar to wizards, but different. They use charisma instead of intelligence for anything. They use charisma to determine their bonus spells and to determine what kind of level of spell. Their charisma score has to be equal to 10 plus the spell level of whatever spell they want to be able to cast. Just like a wizard would do it, but with instead of intelligence, charisma. Now, they do have to get 8 hours rest, just like a wizard would, but afterwards they spend 15 minutes centering their mind, getting themselves in the mood to be ready for their spells. So they just take this little bit of time. It's not the same kind of concentration as a wizard would. If any time within the last 8 hours they cast any spells, then those count against their maximum number of spell slots they have open. Unlike a wizard where they're preparing a spell ahead of time, they can just use any spell they know and fill it into the slot when they're casting it. So I have these open slots that I have prepared. I have a number of spells that I know that I can throw in there. I learn spells, of course, as I level. You are going to select them from your either sorcerer or bard class spell list of appropriate level to whatever one you're learning, whatever one you now know. Your Game Master could allow you to take spells from outside of this list if it is appropriate that you've encountered it enough times, of course, in a set of a journey. Now let's move on from talking about arcane spells and talking about sorcerers and bards to moving and talking about divine spells. The kind of spells that rangers, clerics, druids, paladins all cast. Of course, rangers and paladins don't cast them the same way that a druid or a cleric does. They usually have to gain a bunch of levels before they start casting spells. Now, unlike a wizard, which gains the knowledge to use magic and manipulate the energies that way, a cleric, let's say, for example, would learn it from a divine source. A paladin usually is either a divine source or some kind of source of overall good or lawfulness. A druid and a ranger is getting it from the energy of nature. They're finding a more otherworldly being almost, or other entity, like the overall entity of nature, the overall entity of a god, the overall entity of the goodness around you, is granting them each of their own spells. Now, they do not require any kind of rest to regain their spells, but they only can regain their spells at a certain point during the day. They have to choose some kind of event during the day that represents the time of day that they will then learn their spells. It could be something like sunup or sundown, which are the easiest, but it could be other options that they would come up with that is when they memorize their spells. If they can't at the exact time, they have to do it as soon as possible. If they cannot, they must wait till the next day to memorize it. So they do have a window of error, so to say, that is going to be up to your GM's discretion as to what kind of time frame that is before you're out of luck on getting your new spells for the day. Now, when they start learning their spells, they have to spend an hour meditating and praying in order to regain those spells. They can choose not to prepare all their slots at one time. They can then leave slots open for later on in the day, similar to what a wizard is allowed to do, though they have to use it at this initial time of day for this option to be open. That means I have to, let's say, sunup is my time, I have to spend some time, at minimum 15 minutes, praying and learning spells. The less time you take, the less percentage of your spells you take. So if you would spend half of that hour, half an hour, you learn half the spells. Quarter of it for 15 minutes. 15 minutes is the minimum that you would spend. So if you would even learn any less than a quarter of your spells, you would still have to take 15 minutes to order to learn them. After that, of course, you do have the option then, because you've set it up already, that you've done your initial praying, you could take some extra time later on in the day and complete more of it in order to memorize more spells. Now again, higher ability scores gives you bonus spell slots which you can use. Slots are determined by your class. Your ability score, whether it's wisdom or charisma, since wisdom is for most of those classes, charisma is for paladin. That will again determine the maximum level you could get, 10 plus the spell level that you're trying to cast. Clerics will have the added benefit of having 2 domains in which they get special bonus domain spells in order to add effectively to what they're able to cast. Now let's talk about spontaneous casting, because good and evil clerics and druids can all spontaneously cast. A good druid can give up any spell they have of any slot and cast a equal or lower level cure spell in order to heal. So they can make healing spells out of the spells they memorized. An evil cleric can do the same with inflict spells. So instead of healing, they cause damage. A neutral cleric at the time of their character creation would choose one or the other that they would be able to do. So if I'm a neutral cleric, I would choose whether I'm channeling to heal or channeling to harm and to inflict. Sometimes certain deities will say which one their clerics prefer. Now, a druid can also spontaneously cast, but they spontaneously cast Summon Nature's Ally of the appropriate level to whatever level of spell they're using. So if I'm using up a second level spell, Summon Nature's Ally 2 is what I'm casting. Now, just like arcane spells had arcane writing, there is in fact a divine writing, divine spellcasting writing, that you would need spellcraft just the same DC as you had with arcane spells to know what the writing is. This is most traditional for scrolls. If you have a divine scroll, it has to be on your spell list for you to be able to cast it appropriately. So if it's not a cleric spell, if it's a paladin spell, I have some trouble casting this spell because it's not on my spell list, it's on my paladin friend's spell list, so I would have to give them the scroll. Now the advantage for divine spellcasters is that they have access to every spell on their spell list if it's of a level they can cast. That means as soon as I can cast first level spells, I can cast any of the first level spells. I know them all also. As soon as I hit the second level, I know every last one of the cleric spells to memorize them into my list. I have access to all of them. This doesn't mean that I can't do more to add spells to my unknown or add them into my list. Effectively, what I could do is I could do spell research, developing new divine spells. Similar to what a wizard can do for research, so can divine spellcasters to develop new spells. It's just the same kind of time-consuming and money-using process. Should you do this, you're going to assume you're the only divine spellcaster that can cast it unless you begin to share it with other people. You've developed something unique and special. So that's it for today. I finished talking about arcane spellcasters by talking about the sorcerer and the bard. I moved into talking about divine spellcasters, the clerics, druids, rangers, and paladins, and gave you all a bit of information about them, about their memorizing of spells, their spellcasting, and everything as such. Next time I'm going to finish up a little bit more about magic. There's only a little bit left, just talking about some other special magical abilities pretty much. And then I'm going to start moving into talking about prestige classes, and what they are and how you can take one. So if you have questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave it in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe so support for the channel, the empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, please check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.